Hey, welcome to our uh, development of drama musical theater class. We're trying to figure out how we got here in musical theater. I've made a couple of changes, I think, to the class, and I want to see if I put this in the right order. And if I did, yeah, okay. So I'm going to show you how to find something on our site, which is, it's a little bit obscure, and we went over it the first day, but let's take a look at this for 1 sec. And sorry if this is boring to you, it may be. And then we'll get over it. Okay. So looking at our course modules, I wanted you to be aware of how you can come and look at what's coming up. So in the course overview, which we went over the very, very first day, I'll click on this. So modules week 1, course overview. So blah, why musical theater, and it's a survey class, but I have published the weekly schedule so that you can see this is what I'm thinking about. This is what my plan is. And it will tell you, generally, it will give you all the reading for the whole semester. It will tell you when we're having a midterm, quiz 2, not the topic of the discussion, but it will talk about, discuss the collaborative projects. So when things are upcoming, you'll be able to see, oh, that looks like a mistake. So here's the whole semester, okay? So I wanted to let you know that's in modules, and it's in under course overview. So if you want that separated out into a page and stuck somewhere, we can do that as well. But it just, a lot of you like to look forward, and I just wanted to make sure that you had that information. Questions on that? Does that make sense that it would be in that portion? This little title course overview, I think it's connected to the home page. I think you can, when we went down there, you can connect to it. Course overview right here. So it's not completely intuitive, just like course resources, but they are all in that first week. So if you want to refer to that, just remember to go back to the first week, where our information resources are the very first day. So I wanted to make that clear to you. And then also let's look first at the things that we're finishing up this week, and then we'll go into the lecture for this week. How many of you are reading the book? It's not bad. It's not bad reading. It's a little bit dense, and maybe we're going to slow things down because after I mapped everything out, we can actually spread things out. But I feel like I sort of want to go through the book so that we can get to the part where we can start talking about individual, the plays that interest us. And my particular interest is plays that become bigger and turn into movies or do something like that. And we're going to discuss one of the very first like mega musicals today. That's not, I guess we wouldn't necessarily call it a musical, but it was a major moneymaker. So I had been under the impression that this idea of monetizing Broadway and monetizing the performances on Broadway and investors getting their money back was somewhat new. But we'll look at something today that actually really surprised me from the mid-19th century. So let's look first. I want to at the wrap up, because I want you to be really clear on what the expectations are for this week. And I'll be going to, again, you'll find the wrap up in our modules. So let me show you where that is. I'm going to try and publish it every week. And, I have to say, that'll be a minor miracle if I get that done, but it is my hope and intent. I try to provide them as much information as I can for you so that you can be as successful as possible. There's no mystery. I mean, there's no trick to this class at all. Everything is points-based. You're going to do things, you get points, and that's how it works. So it's not, my son always says, it's a personal attack. It's not a personal attack. But I want to just be as clear as possible on how things work. So always we'll have this little short summary thing. Review your presentations. There's PowerPoint 1 and 2. This is the second one. They're published on the pages under our modules. Participate in the discussion on the playbill. Remember, this is the playbill discussion from the musical, the movie musical, no, the stage musical moving into movie musical that you selected for assignment number 1. So the discussion closes tomorrow. Generally, those things will close Fridays at 11:59 p.m. So you still have time to participate. Remember, it's 10 points for your first post, and I see that a lot of you have started populating that, and then 5 points for each additional point, each of the next 2 posts up to 2, so you get 20 points total. Submit your screen musical critique. And again, that's due tomorrow night. We talked about that last week as well. That's a 50-point project. There is a page on that. Make sure that you look at that and you answer all the questions and you put it in an essay form and upload that. The quiz closes today. So if you haven't done the 5-question quiz, please do that today because, hey, we have a long weekend, so I will be grading. Looking ahead, please look at chapters 3 and 4 for next week. And then what I just reviewed, check your weekly schedule in the course overview. And I'll try and remember to put that at the end of every single wrap up every week. Does anybody have any questions?
Hi, yeah, I have a quick question about the musical critique.
Yes.
Was the example by Roger Derling supposed to be just to get an idea, or because you want it to be like 500 words, right? So it should be way shorter than his, but just kind of.
Yeah, I don't know how many words his is actually.
Okay.
His is included because it is a really descriptive and personal point of view. So, 500 is a minimum. You can certainly put in more if you have, and I've given you, always the assignments are the minimum.
Okay.
You must meet the minimum on the assignment, which is to include each of these elements that I asked for, which is at the bottom. But the reason why I included Roger Derling's, I don't know, it may be a critique or personal point of view or something on that movie musical, is that he's a very engaging writer. So it's a good model to look at. He writes for me in something that I can picture what he's talking about. And it makes me want to see the musical or the movie based on what he says, because he gives it from his point of view. And that was the personal point of view is the thing that's most important about the critique, is that it is your point of view. You're seeing it, you're having the experience, and then meet all the requirements. So yeah, it's not, I don't want it to be an onerous work, but it needs to cover all of those basic issues that I have put in there. That was really just for inspiration.
Okay. Sounds
Also,
good.
the whole thing on the, what the publicity packet was and everything like that, that was just gravy from what was sent out as PR with the movie. I don't expect you to include that kind of thing. That's not part of your assignment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions regarding any of the assignments that are due in the next few days? Okay, so for those of you who joined late, or you have been, you joined our class late, the assignments have been open till the end of this week so that you can get in, particularly the first assignment for me, how to contact you and what your preferred name is, and then any of the other assignments so that you can upload and discuss and participate to the fullest. And then after that, we'll try and keep on schedule. It's a big, I haven't taught this class before. I love musicals. Musicals are how I got into theater. I started as a singer, and I was in a country. I was in a town and a state that I didn't really know anything about, and I didn't really know anyone. I don't think I told you that, but I was with a singing group. I followed a trumpet player. Oh, well, that lasts about 10 minutes. And so anyway, I enrolled in the local community college, and it was not in a place like Santa Barbara. It was in the San Joaquin Valley, out in the middle of agricultural world in Visalia, College of Sequoias. But interestingly, they had a rather new theater, and it was actually quite beautiful, thrust theater, not unlike ours necessarily, about the same size. And prior to that, they had, oh no, wait a second, what am I thinking? When I went there, they didn't have that. When I went there, the performances were all at the big Fox movie theater house downtown, and just much like the Arlington Theater is, where you can have a legit stage there. So it'd be in a 2,000 or 3,000 seat theater, and called the L.J. Williams Theater. And it was, you would perform, you would rehearse and tech, and then you perform for 5 days straight. So you would do Tuesday through Saturdays. And that would be it. I mean, you know, when you're in a small town and you have 2,000 seats, and they would sell out. You know, it was a big sensation. Everyone would come to see those performances. So that's how I got into theater, was because I was a singer. I didn't really know anybody. Open auditions, and the first one I was in, I think, was Fiddler on the Roof. So I met a bunch of people, because when you're working backstage and you're not really, I had a small feature part, but you know, you're having a lot of singing rehearsals, you're having, and then separately you have a lot of dance rehearsals, and then you are having maybe some acting rehearsals. I had a really small part. So basically when we put everything together, which was when we got on stage, I think maybe 2 or 3 days before we started dress rehearsals, that's when I got my blocking, because we were rehearsing in different rehearsal halls or in a choir room or somewhere else. And that was when we first moved to the theater, because again, when you are renting the theater as an outside company going in, and we talked about this last time about how company managers and the production of the piece were separate from theater managers who handle the physical facility. And that has kept true through today. So in this particular instance, the producer was the College of Sequoia's drama department, and they had all of the musicians, which were from the local symphony and all that kind of stuff. They had the singers, the dancers, the featured performers, and then they rented space from the theater for this particular time frame. So when you don't want to spend a lot of money on rent, and you go in to allow for the amount of time that you can tech the show and get it on its feet, and then you start doing dress rehearsals. Many's a time where I have been in a show where we teched act 1 and we teched act 2, and maybe didn't get a complete run through before you started a preview. So, you know, it's kind of an interesting thing. And that's why we talk about the immediacy of theater. Theater is live, it's happening in front of you. And in this very strange world that we're in now of Zoom, when the only thing we have that's live is not even really live, it's Zoom, and maybe you have a virtual screen behind you, so you're not seeing, you know, the upstairs or the dog running by or something like that. But anyway, the immediacy of theater is the thing that is that superpower of theater. It is the energy behind which theater can exist and go beyond the actual elements. And this is the added plus elements together, are the sum is greater than the individual elements. So that's a very interesting part of theater, and it's a part that we should never forget, even though we're in this very strange environment. Any other questions on the assignments or any thing that we've had so far in the course? Okay, excellent. Let's just move right into the material then. And I'm going to show you first where we can find the material, and then we will go to the lecture. Please feel free to talk through any part of the lecture that you'd like. So here we were at short summary. And going back to your modules, and just let me know if the screen tracks everything. You guys can see at the modules now, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I can see you. Okay, great. So here's here's Tuesday's presentation. And we looked at that, and you can see that the reading is here. The recorded Zoom from Monday is here. And the PowerPoint from Monday is here. Okay. So these are coming today. Actually, I'm going to take this out of this page because we have gone to, again, in this week, you'll find everything else that's due. And then we'll see our presentation today. Oh, well, I guess I didn't put it in. Let me put it in here. No, not that. All these things that we have to do. So here's our item for today. I'll put it above wrap up. There we go. And this is what we're looking at today. So we're going to finish up the first musicals from the Showtime book, same reading. Here's the PowerPoint, which, just to warn you, I'm going to give you, we're going to go through a different PowerPoint that has a slight update to it. And I'll replace it. The text is the same. So here's Uncle Tom's Cabin, which is a novel that was, this is from the original book cover in 1852. I think it's always good to look at, to know what you're looking at, to know if you're looking at a redrawing, to know if you're looking at the authentic, original, published cover, to know if you're looking at a republished cover, because we're trying to find the earliest days to now. So it's important that we see things in the order in which they were given. So we'll talk about the very famous stage version of Uncle Tom's Cabin. It became many, many stage versions. And then the Black Crook. And this is an image from the Black Crook waltzes from an illustration of that. You can see this would be a ballet portion. As always, we have our scantily clad girls, low cut, décolletage showing, flesh-colored tights, oh no, like perhaps they're almost nude. And then this very elaborate stage background. A really fun and interesting resource is this University of Texas resource, which has, and are you seeing the Ransom Center magazine? Okay, so this is very new in the last 5 years, a digital collection of the Black Crook. And you can see many kinds of materials that UTA has, University of Texas, from the mega musical 1866, The Black Crook. And you'll see here is Napoleon Saroni, an American, 1821 to 1879. And this is in a production of The Black Crook. And again, you get a great look at costume and how, when you're thinking of World War II, when you're thinking of the Civil War in 1865, women in giant hoop skirts and men completely dressed up in three-piece suits, never even seeing an ankle. And then you would go on to see something on stage and you see this kind of a costume. It would be shocking, somewhat revealing. And this talks about it. We'll talk about it today. Here are some other images. And this is really amazing. Opening night performance ran over 6 hours. So imagine going to the theater in one evening and seeing a 6-hour performance. Full evening of entertainment, comedy, drama, romance, tragedy, dance, music, unparalleled spectacle. So we're going to talk about these things. So this is also part of your book, but this is actually a really fantastic rendition of it and talks about what they've done. So, it's great that we are able to have this kind of material available to us. And now we're back on our site and we're going to take a quick listen to just one little teaser, and then we will go to the lecture. I'm going to try and always give you a teaser of some kind of musical thing because we are studying musical theater. So let's go to YouTube, everyone's favorite. And are you seeing the YouTube? Okay. Very popular song.
I will never more deceive you or of happiness bereave you, but I'll die on me to grieve you, oh you naughty, naughty men. You may talk of love and say for us you're nearly dying, all the while you know you're trying to deceive, you naughty men. You may talk of love and sighing, say.
Okay, so I just want to point out before we continue, we just have another minute or so, but this is a piece of sheet music. And if you're not familiar with music, so the melody is in this top bar. This is the treble clef indicator. This would be treble and bass clef. So this was referring to the accompaniment. And this would be the accompaniment of the piano, and you're hearing other instruments in the background as well. And this is in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is in 4/4 time. These are eighth notes. So each one of these, no, wait a second. These are eighth notes. So that's a quarter, that's a half, 2 halves. Okay, so it should be in, let me see if there's a time signature before, but I think it's in 4/4. All right, here we go.
For us, you're nearly dying. All the while, you know you're trying to deceive you, naughty, naughty man. When you want a kiss or favor, you put on your best behavior and your looks of kindness savor. Oh, you naughty, naughty men.
So this is a time signature that says repeat. So we finished verse 1, and there was a indicator like this at the end of that verse. It says come back to the same melody for verse 2. And remember, we talked about that last time, where we talked about phrasing and sort of an ABA. We have one verse, we have a second verse, okay? And there, the melody is identical.
Of love you set us dreaming, and when we thought we're teeming, we find you are but scheming, you naughty, naughty men. Of love you set us dreaming, and when with hope we're teeming, we find you are but scheming, you naughty, naughty, naughty men. Fortune we inherit, you see in us every merit, and declare we're girls of spirit. Oh, you naughty, naughty men. But too often matrimony is a mere matter of honey. We get bitter instead of honey from you naughty, naughty men. But too often matrimony is a mere matter of money. We get bitter instead of honey from you naughty, naughty, naughty men. But with all your faults we clearly love you, wicked fellows dearly. Yes, we dote upon you dearly, oh, you naughty, naughty men. We've no wish to distress you, we'd sooner caress you, and when kind we'll say, oh, bless you, oh, you dear delightful men. We've no wish to distress you, we'd sooner caress you, and when kind we'll say, oh, bless you, oh, you naughty, dear delightful men.
Okay. Let's just pause that. And that gives us our musical interlude for today from the Black Crook. And again, you hear part of that, what we listened to Renagle last time, the piano version, but now we're getting a much more sophisticated and a much more body sound, a sound that includes dance hall, includes other kinds of instrumentation. So let's look at our lecture for today and our brief, our PowerPoint. Please feel free to insert any questions or anything that you have at any time. And we'll take a look at transition stages 2. So 2 more influential works on stage. Remember, last time we talked about the Astor Place riots, which occurred when Macbeth was on stage. And also they're behind the cultural differences that they had. There were 2 Macbeths that were very popular, one American and one British. And so then that also led to our dissonance with that particular performance. So having that as our background, now we're going to Uncle Tom's Cabin, the musical. And so novelization, novels that were had that then became musicals, also as a seed of a story. This happened from the very first time we have a musical. It's notable because there's no afterpiece at the end of the play. So prior to this, we had a lot of different influences on stage. And at the end, there would be some sort of afterpiece. Oh, here's our idea, and now we're getting to go out singing this next melody, which has nothing to do with what we just saw. It is also notable specifically for a single narrative entertainment for the entire evening. So you come and you see this piece, Uncle Tom's Cabin, based on the novel, which was very, very popular. Before that, we just had a wide variety of things that were available, and you'd go and see an entertainment, not necessarily a single story or a single narrative. So based on the novel by Harriet Beecher Stowe, this appealed to educated audiences because they had read the book and they had a understanding of the book and then wanted to come and see the on-stage live version. This would be very, very exciting and novel by this point. And it appealed to the working class who did not read the book, but they could understand easily and know the work based on what they saw on stage. So Harriet Beecher Stowe refused to give permission to use the novel. Remember, we talked about the controversy behind theater productions, the prohibitions against the stage since colonial times, the religious opinion, the Calvinists versus the Puritans. And Harriet Beecher Stowe was raised in a strictly Calvinist society. And you may remember from your history, Calvin was the one that nailed the edict to the door, saying that, you know, people did not need to go through the Pope to reach God, that they could go to God directly. It was a huge controversy, but she's part of this very, let's see, I don't want to say rigid, but I would say very developed, specific kind of religious opinion. And as the Puritans, who were many of them who came to the United States for religious expression. And here's the problem. Theater makes a public display of deceit. You may see people lying. You may see people in compromising positions, doing untoward things. You may see thievery. You may see, well, just like we heard, naughty, naughty men. So that was her basis of refusal. But without copyright laws, Stowe had no legal ground to refuse. She could, but she couldn't do anything about it. So many playwrights use the novel, make any changes that they wish, and proceed with creating a play. The most famous of this is George Aiken. He wrote the one that's best remembered. This is the one that was just cited by the University of Texas material, 6 hours. Well, 6 acts, 8 tableaux, and 30 scenes. That is pretty significant. Now we have what we call two-night, you know, Nicholas Nickleby night 1, Nicholas Nickleby night 2. We have Angels in America 1, 2. So, but you know, they were used to sitting for that length of time and they paid their money and they wanted their money's worth. Again, our image from Uncle Tom's Cabin, so you can see where this might take place. So Aiken's version, which is the one we'll discuss, is true to the literary source with the abolitionist theme, but some of the details may have changed. As was the practice then, all Black roles were performed by company's white actors in blackface. The philosophic discussions had been removed from the book, and low comedy scenes were inserted, and Legree was punished by killing him off at the end of the play. You remember Simon Legree was the one that put the edict down. But Stowe's view of systematic injustice of racism was reduced to the punishment of one person. And so this simplistic viewpoint that was presented on stage did not reflect the nuanced novel, but did reflect the theme of the novel, but it became this unambiguous story of right and wrong. So, you know, I think it's important that we realize that that's when we're looking at things on stage, and when they say fact and fiction, there are facts that are included, and then there's fictionalized version of facts. It's not a documentary, and he's creating an entertainment based on the novel. But isn't that surprising to you that she did not want it used that way, but nonetheless they went ahead and used it that way? What do you guys think about that? Do you feel it's better to have protections? So it's a melodrama. And I love to use, this is one of the forms we talk about when we talk in theater appreciation, melodrama. Mellow, think of melody here, split it right here. And then a song with a play. So this is an unambiguous story of right and wrong. The Uncle Tom's Cabin appealed to emotions. It emphasized action over character development. So all this busy stuff on stage, what's happening, a lot of movement. The audience comes to see movement, not comes to hear somebody stand and tell a story. And the play obeyed the code of moral conduct. Vice is punished and virtue is rewarded. So the breakdown of a melodrama, and I even think melody drama, it's a play with music, and usually the music is action. So think about those in-between pieces that we just heard in the Millie Cavendish Naughty Naughty Men. The music behind helps you understand what's going on. So if the music is very intense and fast and dissonant, you know that something bad is going to happen. And you know what? I'm going to make a note to try and find a piece to put in here so that you have that to reference. Aikens includes songs in the Uncle Tom's Cabin. Of course, the novel is written without songs, and this would create interest for the audience. The audience can come and see this, and this would be a very important reason to see a new rendition of Uncle Tom's Cabin. Music is inside the play as part of the story. This is an innovation. When we look from our eyes and we're so used to seeing musicals, this seems, of course it would be. But up until this time, it hadn't been. Music was not part of the character overcome with emotion, not being able to speak, then falls into song. This is a brand new innovation that music will be in the middle of the speaking story. So the diegetic is source music. Characters perform the music, and the song and the music is within the context of the story. So there's 3 points about this Uncle Tom's Cabin that where music comes into play and where it is very different from anything that's happened before. Music is inside the play as the story. Music is outside of the play, so the music is an added-on feature where it amplifies the emotion of the scene, and we know this because we are so used to underscoring in movies. And that is really music that's outside of the scene that is heightening the experience for the viewer or for the audience. It might clarify the action of the scene if the sound is particularly dissonant, or they're using instruments that are clashing. They're using a tempo that starts slow and then speeds up. Even certain sounds, make our hair stand on end. We know if something dangerous is coming by the sound. So the music represents the expressive focus in audible terms that the audience hears, but the characters inside the play are not hearing that music. So different from the beginning where the characters performing the music, they're actually saying something, they're expressing something, the music is part of their character. It's within the context of the story and furthers the narrative. This is outside, so it's making a comment on what you're seeing on stage. Excuse me. And this really helps cue the audience on the emotional content of the scene and what's coming up. The third piece of this is music that's neither inside or outside of the play, and it's sung by the character and not heard by other characters, and the character themselves may not actually be aware of it. So this is an internal monologue in the shape of song as externalized by the character. And this technique is not new. Of course, we have monologues in Shakespeare. And our audience would be used to that conceit. The monologues in Shakespeare where the character is trying to work out and mull over something that's in their mind. Again, the very famous To Be or Not to Be from Hamlet. And there we could just list any number of monologues. So if you've been a person that goes to the theater, you would recognize this device. If you're not a person that goes to the theater, you have this one particular character singing an emotional or a working through or a processing of some kind of an event in the shape of song shown by the character, but the other characters are ignoring it. So they can easily understand what's going on. So these three things, inside the story, outside the story, or maybe as this sort of internal monologue, which doesn't actually exist in the play, but it is externalized by the character. All right, let's go to the Black Crook. And this is the one that we had the music from this morning. Completely different from Uncle Tom's Cabin, which started from a true novel, a beautiful literary, what was considered a masterpiece by then. And because Harriet Beecher Stowe took on that abolitionist theme and talked about the systematic injustices. So absolutely great character behind that novel. The Black Crook, completely different. So sensationalism is the reason for the evening at the audience with the Black Crook. From the Greek, again, remember your theater appreciation. Theater is what is seen. It's the seeing place, it's visual. Drama is what is done. Structure, the plot, and the action. The Black Crook in the beginning was just melodrama, a play with songs mashed up with ballet. So weirdly, it was an accidental coming together of two separate things, a combining of two things, really because of really a serious accident. So playwright Charles M. Barras has a melodrama that's called The Black Crook. It's booked into Niblo's Garden Theater. It was even sort of old and worn down by that time and not considered very vital. But the theater manager thought, we're going to put this in there. We're going to book this particular group doing The Black Crook. It's a well-known play. It's kind of like what we call doing an old favorite or a nostalgic piece. So if we today did something like maybe from the 30s, Anything Goes or something like that, it's a piece that's been around a long time. There's some title recognition, so your audience may know it. Some people will not have known it. And so he takes a chance. He's going to book that into the Niblo's Garden Theater. Well, then simultaneously, we have a European dance troupe that they're going to be performing at the Academy, and their performance space burns down. So the manager gets an incredible idea to put this combination together. Creates a combination of a costume melodrama, a romantic ballet, and a fairy spectacle. So it's two completely different production companies, one primarily based in dance and one based in drama. And this manager's booking them simultaneously, and then they're working out when there will be the story and when there will be the spectacle. It's like, this has never been done before. And this is sounding like a musical. Well, we have the story, and then we have the dance part. We have the story, and then we have the part that is explaining something. And they can be completely unrelated. So the story is set in the 17th century. Two young lovers thwarted by the treacherous count who loves the woman. The count is in league with an evil sorcerer who has a pact with the devil, and he's going to deliver the young man to the devil in as payment for some kind of thing that he's made. So we have the two young lovers who are madly in love. We have the count who wants the woman and the devil who wants the man. Sounds pretty straightforward. And here's another image from it. And you can see we have both good and evil, and we have the devil, some kind of lightning. I mean, who knows what this is? It definitely is a mashup, people floating in space. Okay. So here's some of the reviews for the Black Crook. It's a piece of rubbish. Charles Dickens, and there's a whole quote from him in your book. It says the Black Crook is a malignant hunchback leagued with the power of darkness to separate two lovers and the power of lightness coming to the rescue. And then the darkness is defeated, right? So clearly the story portion is not thought to be very, not very literary, not going to win a Pulitzer Prize, not a great story, a piece of rubbish. The music, we had Little Has Survived, so we have some short melodies from it. There were full-blown instrumental sequences for the stage tableau and ballets. So these would be, one will be described in a minute, but things that are transitioning from one piece to the next, beautiful instrumental pieces behind the ballet, singers inserted vocal numbers. So the thing that you just heard was the most popular song, You Naughty, Naughty Men, sung by the leading actress, Millie Cavendish, who played the female young lover. The lyrics and music were written for her, not for the play and not for the musical. And okay, so if you want that song, you bring Millie Cavendish because it has no bearing on the story. And it left with her when Millie left the show. When the next actress comes in, she brings her favorite thing that has been written for her. So you can see how these separate individual sections may be disjointed and then are sort of stuck in. But when you think about that, is that much different than what we do now by having one particular song form and sticking another song form into the middle of it? And it's become very accepted to us. We don't even think that that's unusual. When the movie Moulin Rouge came out, I remember thinking, all Baz Luhrmann's doing is taking every single major musical sweet spot, their famous moments, stringing them together, and then he's inserting popular contemporary music. And that sounds exactly like what the Black Crook did. The scenic effects, however, are spectacular. They're advertised for the audience. Most resplendent, grand, and costly production. And you saw, we'll review those pictures before, but there's like hundreds of things on stage, just so much scenery. Gorgeous and brilliant new scenery, dazzling transformation scene, one scene costing $15,000. And remember, this is in the 1800s. New stage and machinery, latest innovation from Europe costing $10,000. Gas contrivances, calcine lights. Over $50,000 is spent on the scenic elements for this musical. $50,000. Who can translate what that would be in today's money? I mean, this is a very, very big number. And how can we even fathom that? And how much money did they have then? So this is when I said earlier, when we talk about what is the value of investing today, is that something new? The monetizing of Broadway. And it's really something that has happened from the very beginning, because they not only spent the money, then they advertised it, and it has become something that is really part of the vernacular of the play. So $50,000 in today's money would be purchasing power of 120,000. So it would be, oh, sorry, that was from 1985. Let me do that again. I apologize. I didn't think I thought it was 121 million, which I thought seemed about right. Yeah. So it would be $1,342,649. $1,342,649. So imagine you know, this is on par with some of the musicals that you see today that are about $2 million to put on. It had amazing transitions from Mark Twain's account. And of course, he was a very well-known author, but could also appreciate this. So unlike Charles Dickens, and remember that they come from two different perspectives. Charles Dickens wrote of society and then the great unwashed within society. Mark Twain writes of the rural life. One tableau is 13 minutes long. And what they're really talking about is a stage transition. So something that actually happens in between the story and the next piece. So it transformed a dim subterranean gallery into the realms of Stalacta. And you'll see the woman of Stalacta in your book, a picture of her, all radiant and covered with girls, beautiful bare-legged girls hanging in flower baskets, a wilderness of girls stacked up in pile on pile, diminishing in size and clothing. So that means that they're getting smaller as they move away from the front of the stage, dangle high up from invisible ropes. They even use children in the far back of the stage to make even it seem to be smaller women. And then they could get away with less clothing because they were a little bit further away. Arrayed only in camisa, underwear, which would be the top part of the underwear worn underneath the garment. So we actually just had that in the costume design class. I thought that was really interesting to put that term in because this was still in popular conversation in the 1800s. All lit up with glorious or gorgeous theatrical fires and witnessed through a great gauzy curtain. And remember, they're using real fire. No wonder they had so many fires on stage, right? Gauzy curtains, nothing fireproofed, nothing flame-proofed, no extra security and people packed in. So there was an assault on the senses. And
Wait,
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I have a question. How did they get away with like women dressed like that back then? Wasn't that like really, 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 really sinful and taboo?
Really sinful. But I think part of it is this part right here where it says it hinted at nudity with snug drawers over flesh-colored tights. So while I think they may have looked more nude than they actually were, and then people caught up in the moment weren't necessarily discerning the fact that they were seeing these more naked bodies, but also the convention of what you're seeing on stage is not real. And when we have something that's not real happening, we can accept that it's out of our normal experience. And if they become something other than human, like they become gods or fairies or some other type of thing, and they're not depicting, you know, the girl next door, then you can get away with creating this kind of scanty costume. And remember, it is a tradition in theater. And of course, we're as always, we're talking about women in scantily clad attire because men are running the theater. And that's just because, you know, women couldn't sign a contract, women couldn't own a property, women couldn't have a bank account. So men actually were the business behind it. And they would want to use this as part of a selling point for their piece. But both men and women came to see these. So it was considered entertainment, a spectacle, and they're separate from who you are. So there is still, though, as you bring up, Cara, there is still this very much, the theater is a den of iniquity. And this is one of the reasons why. You know, we're looking at three major things, but it's just, you know, it's just so shocking. And it's shocking, I guess, if you have read the classics and you read Greek and you knew that, you know, all of the gymnasium was in when the Greeks did their sporting games, everyone participated nude. It was just completely acceptable. And then you intersperse that on the puritanical ethic of the United States. It's a very strange situation, but we have always accepted even those things that shock us on stage or in film, because they help reveal what might be in your mind. So there's this tintillating juxtaposition of what you feel might be morally correct, but what you secretly hope you want to see or that you could participate in, because there is the allure of that which is forbidden. So I think it comes more out of that genre. Does anybody else have an idea on that? Just a thought, if you do, it might be, we are in such a stage of complete visual overload, and you can get everything on the internet, that we don't think about that anymore. But you have to seriously think about these people without the kind of information resources that we have, and how they're experiencing and expressing different things that they may be feeling inside. Dime penny novels, newspaper, theater. So this is a way that you can vicariously have some kind of an experience that is safe, because you're in the audience, you're not a performer. Of course, performers were way down the list as far as the people in disrepute, unless you were classical, like McCready, and then welcomed into society. But otherwise, if you were an actor, and especially if you were an actress, you weren't welcomed into society. And if you want to see kind of an interesting movie about that, you can look at The Showman that Hugh Jackman was in. I think that might have been last year, where the performers were shunned, because it was, even though people went to see plays and musicals, that you were definitely of a lower class. And then, if it was cheap enough, you would have the working class come and they would embrace it. So yeah, there's this assault on the senses that we got, I think we have that today. I think that our information is so available and so much visual that it bombards us without stopping. Incessantly, we have to close our eyes to stop the images from coming. And it has affected the way that we live by the number of times that we have to check our phone, check our text. Are we checking? Are we responding? Did we get an email? Did you get an email? I mean, it used to be an email, but now it's text. And even before that, Instagram. Why is it called Instagram? Instant, TikTok. How can we get the up-to-minute, every single moment, section, anything, where we can actually be in class, we can be on Zoom, we don't have to come to class, we can watch the impeachment trials on CNN, we can have 4 screens open at once. So that's an assault. That's an assault on our senses. It's an assault on all of everything that is our being. And then we need to, pull back from that kind of thing and just recognize it. And you know what? Maybe it starts here. I mean, people in the movie said Star Wars changed it all because they used such different filming techniques, and it was so overwhelming and so all-encompassing. But maybe it was the Black Crook. So from spectacle and dance with the corps de ballet, and this is a quote from voluptuously formed dancing girls, and that doesn't sound like ballet. We think of ballet as very tiny stick figures, and they have practically no figure whatsoever. They're a drape for a costume, and then the incredible form of the body. But these were voluptuous girls wearing little else than satin slippers and a few rosebuds in their hair. Their costumes were shockingly scant, that hinted of nudity over the snug drawers, which would be the illustration is probably a little more forgiving than the costume may have been. So we looked at the illustration of, and that was a photograph. The photograph started in 1848. So that was a photograph of the woman reclining on the couch with her snug drawers. But for the chorus, they were wearing flesh-colored tights, which were probably, a form of cotton knit underwear tucked into their boots. And movements verged on lewd. So they would be, men and women together, touching each other, close bodies to each other. So it would be, again, quite shocking. And Wait, why didn't it? There we go. And so the reputation of the Black Crook was as the naughty entertainment, but it took in over $1 million. So your investment's 50,000 and you're making $1 million. Well, that's a huge amount of money. It's a big return on the capital investment, well worth the investment. And it was a run of 475 performances, which was far more than any previous production. You know, the productions before we talked about, they would run until people were bored with them, and then that was it. There was no more material. The material was exhausted. So they kept this material alive, and it was not exhausted. It was, the physical theater space was in an excellent location in New York on a corner of Broadway and a street that was well traveled. So it was easy to get to. It was well known. They had excellent visual PR availability. So the theater itself was great. It was lucky that when the European Ballet Company's venue burned down, that they were able to get into the Garden Theater. The manager of the theater, again, not of the production company, but of the theater, welcomed any publicity. So he's the one that footed the bill for it. He paid the players, and he and whoever else was his investor were the ones that reaped the rewards from that, not the individual artists or the two companies that came in. Another new thing about Black Crook was that it became the first national tour in 1867. So they probably toured by train, and then it played for 20 consecutive seasons across the country. So they could go to all parts of the United States, the contiguous United States. Of course, Alaska and Hawaii didn't exist. And they probably even came out to the Gold Rush area, San Francisco, Seattle, probably not Los Angeles at that point, but, you know, Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas, someplace in Texas. And it ran for 20 seasons, each with its own set of improvements. So much in the same way, if we have a different cast, you might be seeing different singers, different music. And so that actually goes for this 475 performances. When you bring in a new star, you're going to be bringing in some new music because that person's bringing their music with them. But this idea of touring really is now, we have a specific script that is in this format, and then they are developing a tour from that to take that out to the rest of the country. And that establishes the mythic status of the Black Crook. So even if you never hear of anything else, the Black Crook is a thing that people talk about often. And we still have tours today. I mean, you know, tours are what often support Broadway plays. So in summary of these particular things, we have the Astor Place riot, which led us to specialization in theater and the separation of popular culture from other cultural forms. So remember, we had the sort of like the class wars there. In Uncle Tom's Cabin, we have one play entertainment, so one story throughout the evening, the narrative, even if it's 6 hours. The one theme, the play, the story starts at the beginning, goes through the middle, goes to the end, and that's what you're going to see. One thing, that's a new concept. Through tours, theater reaches into every corner of the nation. There is a staged narrative with musical elements, and we talked about those 3 kinds of elements: interior, inside the play, outside the play, and then what might be an internal monologue. And then the Black Crook promotes the demise of the stock company. So the stock company doesn't exist that holds together the whole production, because if we can bring in replacement actors and the play can go on for 20 years, there is no stock company of players as we had since Shakespeare's day. The Black Crook creates a combination system, which can lead to great profitability. So this combination can be narrative dance, narrative song, even the transitions in between the two scenic elements. 13 minutes, that's pretty darn long. And we talk about, oh no, this transition has to be less than a minute. Oh, the audience won't sit there, it must be shorter. but they saw the transition from one scene to the next as part of the production, done in front of the audience. The audience wants to see the magic of theater, and they wanted to show off the amount of money that they spent. So a part of musical theater as an extravaganza and a musicalized spectacle. Musical theater is built on this kaleidoscope of episodic stage forms that use music and is identified by a wide variety of names. That is our last slide, I think. Yes. Okay. So kind of a lot of material, wrapping up those three different forms that we had. And you can see how that all plays into where we go in musical theater. Any discussion on any part of that or anything that brings up? And thanks, Cara, for bringing in your thought as we were going through that. I exited out of that. And no thoughts on that. Okay. So then I'll just want to go back to the Black Crook since we talked about that. I don't know why I can't find my page. Here we go. Yes. Sorry, gonna try and when you go to a YouTube, then you end up on some other place. So let's go to this material on the Black Crook that is housed at the University of Texas. Hope I'm looking at the right thing. Okay. Okay. So that's why this musical has become so important, is that it really put together this combination thing. You can see this incredible scenery, this idea of spectacle, which probably started with Veronese in the 18th century with different kinds of scenes. But in the United States, it's coming for the first time, and how they're spending this extraordinary amount of money. So let's look at a couple of other things. And this is the woman I wanted to reference again. So she is wearing some kind of leg wear on top. This would not be bare legs. Wearing these shorts with this skirt that is a split skirt, a bodice that's very tight. She has on some kind of a corset with a tight sleeve. And this would be very scandalous to see her, so that you can understand, if you would have seen women completely covered up until this time, that this is one of the reasons why it's worth your ticket money to go see it. It really gives you, it's why people go to Vegas. It's why you go see a strip show. It's why you have gentlemen's clubs, except this is the first time it's really publicly available. So in this language, it's the earliest example of what would become the American musical. And then you can even see how this influences the mega musicals or the British musicals that we started getting in the 80s, the Andrew Lloyd Webber, more than Stephen Sondheim. The same image, and they said it was between $25,000 and $50,000, 50 stagehands to operate, a chorus of over 100 dancers performing as fairies in the glittering cave of Queen Stalacta. So in this thing, if there's fairies and there's so many of them, they're not part of human. And I think that's one of the things that becomes it's a distancing factor. We can allow this to be seen because they are playing fairies. And again, the response of flesh-colored tights, making it appear as though they were scandalously nude, and it was defamed by all of the preachers and that kind of stuff. So this is a really interesting picture of backstage. Let me see if I can make it a little bigger. So you can see how behind the screens you would get people going up these stairs. Here's a stagehand, performers coming up, the fairies with wings, higher elevation so that they could be seen, and a stagehand here maybe wiring somebody up to get up. Here's the hemp ropes that are being used to haul things up. This is a counterweight so that when scenery is lifted, this weight helps them pull the scenery up because it's much more than one man can hold. So the weight of it helps pull it down. But these are all natural hemp ropes. You can see how many of them there are and how much flammable material there is backstage. Really a significant number. And again, a great view of emphasis on the bust. Here's the fairy wings. She's wearing a little feather fan in her hair and pulled up, affecting bloomers with these tights, with boots, with cuffs on them. And again, this is an illustration, so not every woman would probably look that beautiful in the costume. But it's important to remember that when we look at these things, oh shoot, I lost maybe I can go back. Let me try that. There we go. That when we look at these things, we actually see how the mechanism works behind the stage. And this is from Charles Dickens when he's writing to the English actor. I've seen the Black Crook and the White Fawn in majesty from an armchair in the first entrance, P.S. more than once. Of these astonishing dramas, I beg to report, seriously, that I found no human creature behind who has the slightest idea what they're about. Upon my honor, my dearest Macready. So this is a pun, right? And that having some amiable small talk with a neat little Spanish woman who is the premiere danseuse, I ask her in joke to let me measure her skirt in my dress glove. So holding the glove by the tip of the forefinger, so he has his glove off, he's holding it by the tip of the forefinger. He found the skirt to be just 3 gloves long, yet its length was much in excess of the skirt of the 200 other ladies whom the carpenters were at that moment getting into their places for a transformation scene on revolving columns, on wire and travelers in iron cradles, up in the flies, down in the cellars, on every possible description of float that Wilmot, gone distracted, could imagine. So he made it clear that the popularity was not owed to the book by Charles Barras or the music by Thomas Baker, but rather by the spectacle and the sensuality offered to audiences. So it was revived for decades until about the 1940s. So it did 20 consecutive seasons, but then was continued to be revived even until the 20th century, when with World War II, the changing tastes of American theater made it fall out of favor. And then as part of the 50th anniversary, a small scale revival will be remounted at the Abrams Art Center in New York on 2016. So here you can see the size of the performance, the audience space. Look at how they're packed in here. So we have the orchestra, the first tier, the second tier, and the above balcony with side boxes for those who have a lot of money. Remember, I talked about if you had more money, you could sit closer to the stage. So these people have a lot of money, and you notice that they are able to be viewed by almost the entire house. And that's one of the things they get for their money. The theater is very opulent. It has highly decorative ceilings. When you walk into it, you feel like you're walking into a very beautiful palace with these windows all around, which would have been curtained, and then so that would be dark. And then you can see the scale of the performer on the stage. And this would be a proscenium theater. And we're looking from the stage view out towards the audience instead of the view that we normally see. So I want to go quickly to the small scale revival. Let's just see if they give us some imagery. Now, I wanted to get this image out for you and put it on, but here's one of the costume characters who's playing, not the devil, who's the guy that sold, anyway, he's the one that sold his soul to the devil, and he's going to get the young man and take him and give him to the devil. So you see there very careful cummerbund on the costume, the these scales indicating snake, horns indicating something evil, the devil horns, the peaked hood, the arched and vertical angled eyebrows, again, always a staff, and his boots with the high back to the boots and a cape. So this is the revival. That's an image from the original performance, but then this is the revival that they did in 2016 with featuring these people. You know that when you have an asterisk, it means that you've got an equity person, and it is in appearance in concert with Actors Equity, but I was hoping for a picture. So I don't think we've got one there. All right. That is what we have. And any questions? Because otherwise we can end early. No questions. Everyone's watching CNN. No? Okay. So remember to update your Zoom if you haven't done that.
I
So,
had a question, but I got kicked off.
oh, welcome back.
Thank you. Well, I didn't go very far. I just had to put it back up again.
Yep.
Did they travel overseas with this production? The Black Crook?
Yeah, actually there was one reference to it going somewhere. So I think in that, I'm just trying to think, we just saw it. Maybe it was in the University of Texas thing, but they did travel it.
Okay, because I was wondering how, I guess Charles Dickens might have come over here or they did it over there because.
Yeah, no, I think he did come over here. McCready was over here, remember, doing the Macbeth, and I think Charles Dickens did come to the United States, but also it did travel, and since it did was in production until 1940, until World War II, it would have had plenty of opportunity to travel.
And another question I had was it done over in Europe, you know, the scantily stuff before they did it over here?
Interesting question. I'm trying to think of what I remember from the Stuart Court masks. That would be the English equivalent of the French, the Veronese masks, which were, you know, very much costumed tableaus done for palaces.
I know that the Puritans kind of dictated things in this country.
Yeah.
Right?
That would be a really good question for our historical projects. If somebody wants to take that on as a project, I think that could be a really fascinating piece, is just to look at this concept of scantily clad performers. Did it start in the United States? I can only imagine it would have been started far before the 1860s in the US. I think it would be before that in Europe. But that would be a really interesting thing to see if you can find information on that and to bring that to the group. I think that'd be one of the great topics. I'll try and note that down as an additional one rather than just a historical piece.
Okay.
Yeah, very, very good question. And I don't know the answer. And I'm really thinking of my history of costume. You know, as we looked at the Roman bikini girls, which we have from mosaics, and we see that they were wearing, you know, as brief a bikini as we have as today in the Roman times. And of course, but, you know, after the fall of the Roman Empire, there was a whole big clothing, we're putting on a lot of clothing after that. So I think that certain things come with wealth. Clothing is essentially a protection. So by the time you get into a performance situation like this, maybe that's part of the allure too, is that these people on stage don't have to be as protected as we do in our everyday lives from other people, from the elements, from the place in which we live, so they can afford to have this kind of undress. Yeah, I think that's a great topic. That was certainly one that would be up my interest level, being interested in costume. It's probably the kind of thing that the Costume Society would take on as an excellent topic for a presentation. Yeah. Thank you for that. Anyone else? How many of you were surprised by the kind of content or the costume or the cost? Like, were you surprised by the cost at that time that they would invest that much money?
Yeah, that's what was so surprising, actually.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone even had that amount of money then, really, to invest in entertainment. Sounds pretty wild.
Well, and we think about it now. I mean, 50,000 is a considerable sum, and for many, an entire year's salary. So to invest that and take a chance that you would get that kind of money back. I mean, theater's always been very risky. So to say, you know, I believe in it so much that I'm going to invest that kind of money, that's a fascinating topic.
Yeah, I would be interested to find out how he convince people to do that. Even like that's such an interesting pitch to think about for
Right, and maybe that's another topic for our more in-depth research is how did somebody come up with that kind of money to put on something like that in the mid 1800s in the U.S.? You know, was he wealthy? Was he independently wealthy? Did he have some kind of family money and decided to do it? Did he have other friends who were in the railroad business who had a lot of money? Yeah, very interesting. A very interesting thing. It's like there's no GoFundMe page.
Yeah.
So how did he come up with 50 grand? Yeah, fascinating. I mean, there were super wealthy people, and generally they were not in theater, but they had to be contributing to it in some way.
Yeah, and the 6 hours is something that I also, it's hard to imagine.
Yeah, I agreed. I mean, you know, nowadays, even when you go to a movie for 2 hours, if we ever get back, it's been a year, you know, it's considered a long movie. And no comment about intermission, notice.
Mhm.
So it could be that the audience decorum was maybe a little more informal. You can get up when you wanted to and walk out. I mean, certainly that was the case during Shakespeare, is that you had free access to move in and out. It wasn't considered inappropriate to get up in the middle of something and go somewhere else. So, you know, if you're there 6 hours, you're there a lifetime. I mean, what are you doing about food? Are you bringing it with you? Are they selling it there? I mean, all of that stuff around the theater experience is very interesting. Creature comforts, you know, what did they do about restrooms? Are they out in the street? So yeah, that's a good point. And what about the stage mechanisms, you guys? What did you think about that? That they're wiring these people and putting them on fly systems, and they're being suspended in midair. No,
They're risky to me.
yeah, I mean, yeah, it does sound very risky, and you know, they didn't have I don't know that they were doing the fall tests. You know, every time we do something with a rope or a wire, we know exactly how many falls. If you're talking about mountain climbers, they are responsible for their own ropes. They know how many falls the rope can take. And that's called a stress test, because here's your rope. And when you add an incredible amount of weight at a percussive moment, it's going to stretch it. So that calls another thing into question. Yeah, from the chat, Josephine says scary. Imagine it was all women and then some children even. No rules about child labor at this time. And how much were they paid? We don't seem to have any information on that.
Well, I think it's interesting, like how much technology hasn't changed.
Yeah.
In some sense, like they were doing this back then, and
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there are some really cool other things, but there's still people flying in on wires, you know.
Oh yeah. I mean, that was a big deal with Mary Poppins. Look, we're flying Mary Poppins in on a wire on stage, or Spider-Man is swooping around, and yeah, and they're doing it, you know, in the 1860s. Crazy, 150 years ago. And probably in a much less safe manner. I mean, there's nothing about,
Well, yeah, obviously.
you know, how many people died trying to figure this out, or what happens when the stagehand drops the hemp rope, or you know, before, if the counterweight system isn't working, maybe they have 2 or 3 people on one rope to get whatever lifted up into the air. And if they're suspended on a batten, and we have 2 girls on one batten, and then we have, you know, 2 girls on another one, and, you know, 50 stagehands, that's got to be kind of chaotic backstage. So that, I mean, that's a huge number. How many of you've worked backstage, and how many people are working backstage? So that sounds like the Metropolitan Opera in New York, really. So it's a very big production. And that's not counting costumers, people to get them into their clothes, to help with costume changes, attach their wings. I mean, look at all the elaborate stuff that they had. So that was really surprising. Anything else that's kind of interesting? What do you think about let's stay on Black Crook for a minute, and then we'll go backwards. But anything else about Black Crook? The huge spectacle, the huge amount of money, the number of performances, that they created tours, that they could somehow take this whole dog and pony show on a train and set it up somewhere, and that they had a theater somewhere that they could set it up. And it may not have been the same. It's not the same today. When you're seeing a tour, you're not seeing the same thing that has been installed in a theater for that specifically one kind of performance. But the amount of money, the kinds of performers. What do you think about performers? Do they have it's sort of switched, because in performers, or, you know, certainly stars, are no longer viewed as less than, or some kind of tawdry personality, and they're invited into society. But I do think some of that viewpoint towards women, maybe that even went all the way through to the Me Too movement, of people who had more money could take advantage of a particular person because they wanted the job, and you could be in a scantily clad situation. I know that when I worked on one of the early HBO shows, we had a number of background workers, extras that came in, so they were paid by the day. And this was it was called First and 10. It was a big football thing. So we had football teams. We had the team owner, who happened to be O.J. Simpson. So yes, I worked with O.J. Simpson, and he was the, you know, owner and manager of this team. We'd had girls come in. There would be like big pool parties. And producers would go to those girls and say, well, will you take your top off? We'll give you an extra $50. So this was in contemporary time. They were manipulating young women who, they weren't asking men to do that, but it was HBO. So that was a big deal. It was considered, you know, it's a subscription audience. So it's not the public. They don't have to go under the censor laws that the public has to go into. It's not network. So they are like, in that consideration, subscription, private TV. And they would literally ask girls, and they were hired, of course, because show us a picture of you in your bikini and bring your 2 bikinis, and you would do this pool scene, and then they'd put on a different bikini so they could be a different girl in another pool scene for whatever, episode 6 instead of episode 4. And they would ask them, we need this many girls with their top off. And they would manipulate them by saying, we'd give you extra money for that. So that was happening. And I imagine it happened here at the Black Crook. So it's something we need to keep in mind. You know, that's human beings as a commodity. Okay. I mean, when was the HBO show? That would have been like in the 80s. I mean, I didn't go to LA till 88, 87. So it was sometime in there. That was one of the first things I worked on, probably in 88. I was the costume supervisor. I, you know, tried to keep track of, when you're working in television, you're working completely out of sequence. So for that particular show, we shot all of the live football scenes. So we had our home team, and they played the 11 different teams, and it was the same guys. And then they just put on different uniforms. And then, you know, it became the red team, the blue team, the green team, or whatever the name were. And, you know, so we filmed everything only by location. So all of the interior office scenes for all 20 episodes were filmed the same 2 weeks. So if they were coming in episode 1 in this costume and they'd walk out in that other one, then when we went to the outside of that office scene 2 weeks later, they had to be in the same costume. It was a nightmare for us, but yeah, so it would have been in the late 80s, which is not that long ago, about 30 years ago. Long ago for you guys. But that was my first, it wasn't the actual first thing that I worked on, but it was one of the early things that I worked on. And I was horrified when I found out about that. I was also horrified by O.J. Simpson's behavior, but we can talk about that off site. Okay. Anything else before we leave the Black Crook? Let's talk just for a second about this idea of ownership and Harriet Beecher Stowe, and that as the novelist, she had no ownership over when the piece was transformed into a different media. So when it went from novel to a play or a musical, they could use her work as they wanted to. No copyright permission was needed. What do you think about that?
Well, if I wrote a novel, I wouldn't want them, making,
Changing the storyline.
yeah, changing the storyline. I mean, there was a movie I saw, but I can't remember the name of it. It was about the woman that wrote Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
And she came and met with Disney.
Yeah.
And she was very upset because she didn't want these songs being sung.
That's right. That I had forgotten about that. Actually, I have that movie too. And it was about the author of Mary Poppins, coming in and having Disney Disneyfy that and make it into a musical.
Walt Disney was played by a very famous guy. Now I can't think of his name.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, because that's one thing I was going to bring up, which is when you change venues, so it's no longer a book and it becomes a movie, or it's no longer a stage musical and it becomes a radio play, and it's a radio play that then becomes a movie, the rights to the original material become a little bit murky. Copyright of material is generally 72 or 75 years, and you can apply for an extension, and after that point it's considered in public domain, and anyone can then use the material. So when you want to do something cheaply, you try to find something that's in public domain. And I guess they assume that after 75 years, the original author of the material and their heirs will have mined that piece for everything that they can get out of it. And then for some reason, it's not owned by you in perpetuity, but someone else can then use the material, and particularly even before that, use the material in a different form. So it's a question that we need to think about in entertainment. What are our resources? What are our original resources? Are we honoring those people who've come before? And is that story, I mean, of course, you can say that there's no new stories, that it's boy meets girl, boy meets boy, girl gets girl, boy gets girl, whatever. But, are we really honoring that original resource for this particular work? So those of you who are budding authors or budding playwrights, and you're using original source material, certainly in movies, they do a buyout, of an original source material. And when they see a play and they want to use that for a movie, money changes hands. And often what happens is the buyout of something is more than what the eventual person makes off of it. But a lot of times it's less, and then it's a lot less. So if the manager for the Garden Theater paid the companies, you're going to get $10 a week, and that would have been a huge amount of money, but and then makes $1 million off of it. They were happy, they got paid at that moment, and he took the risk and made more money. So we've always rewarded risk. and the ability to go out on a limb and the courage to say, I believe in this thing. So, it's a real mixed bag. We have to, always think about that and act with integrity. Anything else? Otherwise, we can wrap it up. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of your work because I'll be grading this weekend. So please expect to see that. I will, in the grading section, don't be surprised, I can make a video and respond to you. I will often write comments and respond to you, and then you will get those comments and you can write back to me in the comment section. And you can also write back to me via Canvas. So I will also try and be observant and read your comments back. So I welcome the exchange back and forth. Okay, any last moments? Otherwise, I'd like you to be safe for the 4-day weekend and take good care. But anything else at all? Take a look at your book, read it, do your quiz, do your discussion, do your critique, and I will see what is making you guys be excited. If not, then we can say goodbye. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all. Thanks for coming. Thanks for sticking it out.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
You too. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Yes. And Jean, don't forget to let me know when you get your book.
Sure, no problem. In next week, maybe.
Yeah, I know. I'm anxious to see that. I think that'll be great.
Perfect. No problem.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.